Today's episode is brought to you by OfferingTree. If you don't know OfferingTree, let me tell you about this amazing company because they're actually listening to what yoga teachers and studios need. And they're creating the best all-in-one software that I know of for wellness professionals. So if you are wanting a simple and professional website where you can schedule your classes, take payments, book appointments, and easily have Zoom integrated automatically, your time zones there, and so many currencies available, go to offeringtree.com/Shannon for a special podcast listener discount. And today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. This is an online membership for yoga teachers, PTs, movement educators, healthcare professionals, and anyone on the planet wanting to learn more about pelvic health. In there, we hire the guest experts to teach us the most up-to-date information. You get to attend live calls or watch the replay and get your questions answered in real time. Our December guest inside of Pelvic Health Professionals was just recently on the podcast back in episode 299. Niev Daly was talking with us about menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause, all the time around menopause. If you have not listened to that episode yet, find it over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/299. And if you want to learn more beyond this call, if you want to learn more about what you can do as a yoga teacher, working with people who are in this phase of life, you can join our call live. Visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com to sign up or to get more information. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her. This podcast is being recorded on Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga land, also called the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. And right now, out my window, there is snow everywhere and already a snow squall watch. Not a warning, which is worse here where I live, but a watch. So they're calling for a lot of snow over this weekend, and it's here, friends. I need to get outside and do my walks. If you are new here, you might not know that I struggle to get outside in the winter, and I try and walk every single day once it gets cold and snowy, and it's difficult, and I post that over on Instagram. So if you're not already friends with me on Instagram, come on over and follow me and cheer me along as I try and not go into a full-blown hibernation state over here. You might not also know that I'm a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. Now, if you are a returning listener, you know how things go here. This podcast was created for you, the yoga teacher, so that each and every week you can feel connected to the information and ideas that are going to support you and the business that you are building. Because I get it. Leaving a yoga teacher training and then creating a business that you love can feel next to impossible. That's why I'm excited that we get to hear from Nicole Lewis-Keeber today about business ownership and an aspect that we may not immediately think about when it comes to this, which is trauma. Nicole is a business therapist and mindset coach for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders. They are a licensed clinical social worker with a master's in social work and a rich experience of working as a therapist. Nicole is also certified in Brené Brown's The Daring Way and Dare to Lead methodologies and provides trainings and mentoring for those who want to become daring leaders. Nicole has combined her experience as a therapist and training as a coach to offer therapeutic and business solutions. She's also the author of How to Love Your Business book, founder of the Love Your Business School, and creator of the Do No Harm program for trauma-conscious entrepreneurs. Nicole and I chat about how trauma ties into creating and running your own business, including what kind of trauma counts, quote unquote counts, why starting a business involves diving into our own stuff, and why our big why is likely connected to childhood trauma. They also share more about the importance of therapy as an entrepreneur, dealing with burnout, and why we need to separate ourselves from our businesses. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm so glad you get to learn from Nicole today. Let's dive in and learn more about trauma, business ownership, and how to create the business you love. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Nicole. It's so great to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm really excited that we get to talk about our own stuff and how that impacts our business. Our yoga teachers, got into this work because they really want to share yoga. They see how the benefits impacted them in their life, and they want to share it with others. And the business side can be tough. And I'm excited that you get to help us with that today. Tell us, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Yeah, so I work with small business owners, entrepreneurs, and leaders to help them excavate childhood trauma's impact on their business. It is my goal to have, an army or let's say a consortium of trauma-conscious entrepreneurs and business owners to really recognize that we all we are is who we are in everything that we do, right? And so I've taken my training as a therapist. I was a therapist for 18 years before I started working with small business owners, and have been exploring the impact of trauma on entrepreneurship ever since I started my business. And it's been a very interesting ride, let me tell you.
Okay, so I want to clarify a few things. So we all have our stuff. Do we all have childhood trauma?
I would be hard pressed to say that I've met anyone that doesn't have some form of event in their childhood that was traumatic to them, that then changed how they saw themselves, how they, then had some kind of pattern to help them regulate around it. So I've not met anyone yet who hasn't had some kind of traumatic event in childhood that changed things for them yet. So and okay. And I think that this is part of the challenge is that we as a culture only see trauma as like this very thin definition. And even that definition, we are really not willing to let people name that and get support for it. But we miss this whole other, experience of how trauma can show up for us and what we call little T trauma as therapists, and how those cumulative events impact us and they change how we see ourselves and the decisions that we make and how our emotions are regulated. All the systems around us also can be very traumatic, for us. So, there's a lot of education on my part about telling people you probably had an event or multiple events in your childhood that were traumatic for you that other people would not then see as trauma. And part of our healing here is naming it, calling a thing, and beginning to heal from it. So, but we got to start with allowing people to say, yeah, that was traumatizing to me. I don't care if you didn't think it was.
Right. Exactly that. I love when you just said that. It doesn't matter how someone else deals with maybe even that exact situation. It really matters how we internalize that. Okay. Yeah. And then how does this have to play? Like, what does this have to do with business?
Because, first of all, when you start a business, it is a high dive into personal development, whether you want it to be or not. Like your stuff comes up. And we don't leave ourselves at the door when we start a business. Like a lot of the business schools and a lot of the coaches would like you to believe that all you need is a sales plan, a marketing plan, business plan. But I totally believe that you need an emotional sustainability plan for your business. And that's what I help people create, because the experiences that you had in your childhood that inform why you want to have a business in the first place often have their origins in a traumatic event, which then means that 8-year-old that had that traumatic event that then said to themselves, I'm never going to feel this way again, or I'm going to prove to this person that I am valuable, or I'm going to have all the money, so I'm always in control. That 8-year-old is on the board of directors in your head running your business. And so I think it's so important for us to recognize that just because we start a business does not mean that all of those experiences and all those ways of coping are not informing the origin of our business. I call it like your deeper why.
Okay, so this deeper why could be connected to a traumatic event that we had as a child. I'm sitting here thinking, how do we figure that out? How do we figure out which and I guess the other question is, what's the value in figuring out that childhood trauma and how it informs our business choices now and our why?
Yeah. So I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and when we kind of trace back to when was it that you thought you might want to be your own boss? Like, when did that origin story of I'm going to work for myself, or I want to have this entrepreneurial life, or whatever it is they said to themselves. Usually we can trace it back to an experience where they felt unseen, unsafe, unheard, and they're trying to gain some power. And that younger version of them in that moment is saying, I'll show you, or that's never happening to them again. So it's a place of rebellion or proving something. And if you've had trauma in your childhood, there's a lot of skill sets that come from entrepreneurial skill sets that come from having those childhood experiences that are traumatic. Letting the buck stop with you because you're the one in control, having a high tolerance for experiences that are uncomfortable. That resilience factor that people talk about, needing to be in control. And a lot of those, their trauma adaptations are really beneficial to small business ownership or entrepreneurial life, at least in the beginning. And so there's this motivation to start a business. This deeper why is, I never want to feel unsafe again, or I want to prove to this person that I am valuable. And so how can I do that? Oh, I'll start a business. I'll be an entrepreneur. And so that deeper why that's connected to their business is kind of running under the surface. But the problem is, when you don't recognize that, you then don't give yourself the relief that you were looking for. You meet a goal and you're like, great, next goal. You don't allow yourself to feel supported in the way that the origin story of your business was created for. Does that make sense? It's kind of like you stay in the spinning place because you don't really recognize why you really started your business in the first place.
This makes a lot of sense. So if I'm hearing you right, we might have good traits, like strong traits that help us as entrepreneurs. But at somewhere, it's like we are, like when you said we set a goal, we hit it, and then we're like, okay, on to the next thing. That's a common thing that I hear amongst entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Can you give us any other examples of things that you see, especially in the health and wellness space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me give you another quick story about what that deeper why looks like. And so I met someone at a conference. Well, it was not a conference. It was an event that I was speaking at. And we were talking about this whole idea of the 3 whys, which is a book I wrote several years ago. And she said, okay, so my divine why is that I want to help people take control of their health, and especially their gut health. And so I have devoted my time and energy to being a wellness coach who helps people with that particular issue. And so she said, however, my deeper why is that I want to feel valuable to my family of doctors. Everyone in my family are doctors, and they don't understand why I don't want to be a doctor. So I want to be successful, and I'm going to hustle it up in my business to show them that I am valuable and that I don't have to be a doctor to help people. So her deeper why is informing her work, and she didn't recognize that she was trying to prove something to her dad by having this business as a wellness coach. So there's no way she can control her father's belief of her, and to sign off on the fact that he didn't think she should be a doctor, and to kind of question this career as a health coach. She can't get her dad's approval through her business, but she sure is trying. And once she realized what her deeper why is, she was able to then give that to herself and stop hustling for his value of her. Right. And so that's kind of another story of how that deeper why can impact you. So why, like dad still doesn't think it's good enough. So I'm going to do more. Dad still doesn't think it's good enough. So I'm going to write a book on it. Dad still doesn't think it's good enough. So I'm going to be a highly paid keynote speaker on this topic. Dad still doesn't think it's good enough, And so it's so steeped into the spine of her business. She didn't even recognize it. And when she was able to do that, things changed for her. So that's kind of an example of how that might look.
Oh, this is fascinating. So what I hear is this, like, basically it sounds like overworking, and never pausing to take in the accomplishment there.
Mm-hmm. Because dad didn't give it to her.
Right. And what other ways does this show up then? Like, I'm thinking of our yoga teachers who, say yes to everything or hit that burnout moment. Mm-hmm. Is that sort of the same thing, or are there many different ways that this shows up?
There's so many. What I see with the clients that I work with, and what happened with me, because heal thyself. I was a therapist for 18 years, and I left that field because I was burnt out, and I started my own business doing mindset work, money mindset coaching for small business owners. That's what I initially started doing. And then what I was recognizing is that the clients that I was working with, and I worked with everybody, people who own gyms, people who are coaches, therapists. And what I started to see is that they didn't have a money mindset issue. They actually had a trauma, like a money trauma that was playing out for them, that there was a deeper issue around the money behaviors that they had and how they valued themselves. And so all the mindset tips and tricks that they were getting from people reading all the books, they weren't working for them because this was actually a trauma response for them, that they were really struggling to own their value or really struggling to have a solid relationship with their money, or, being visible in their business in a way that made sense for them so that they could make more money. And so visibility can be really connected to anytime you felt unsafe and seen as a child. Being visible to promote your business can also be a challenge. But what I saw with my business the first 2 years, because I had worked for other people, I never had a business for myself, is that I then saw that I was replicating my own childhood trauma with my mom, who was a really domineering, adult, that I was then using my own business to recreate that pattern with my mom and my business. So in essence, my business then became my mother, who I could do nothing enough for. I couldn't please my clients enough. I put myself out there too much to try and people please, to make my clients happy, to make my employees happy. Like, I was trying to make everyone happy, but I never felt like what I was doing was working, because my business was really a stand-in for my mom's lack of respect, for me. And so I see that a lot, is where, because we have that deeper why about our business can then kind of take on the personality of these really hard relationships. And we end up playing out that role in our business, because you are not your business. It is something that you are relating to. And so we bring those relational roles into the way we operate. So I couldn't do anything right by my business. I could not do enough for my clients. I could not work enough hours. I could not make enough money, because I didn't recognize that, right? So it was just constantly jumping through hoops, because I had set my business up to be my mom, who was very, rough, rough relationship. It sounds so bad, but I promise it could get better. But it's, we don't recognize this. No one asks us, hey, do you have any childhood trauma that could show up in your business when you started? No one's asking you that question.
Right. Oh my gosh.
They wouldn't even ask a therapist. Like, we all go into therapy for a reason. No one's asking us really to examine that piece of it really deeply, and particularly not in how we create our group practices or our businesses. Like, no one's asking you that question.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal story and highlighting how our relationship with our business is where this will play out. Before you and I hit record, I was talking about my therapist. Shout out to Diane, who I hadn't been going to see for a while. I mean, sometimes it just falls off my list. And when I go back there, I'm reminded, oh my gosh, this is why I go, because then I feel like I can see things. Like, it's like I have really dark glasses on or something, or like some kind of veil in front of my eyes, and I can't see the same things until we start to dig into it. So I'm guessing it's the same way with our business.
It totally is.
And so what are some of the things that maybe if someone's listening now and they're like, okay, definitely there were things that happened in my childhood. I'm not sure how they're showing up in my business. What are some of the ways that we could start to help ourselves just in this time of listening to the podcast?
I think the very first thing is for us to recognize, we talked about those definitions of trauma before, getting really clear about this, because, I grew up in a generation, I'm 51. I grew up in a generation, that Gen X generation, where it did not matter what happened to you. No one was coming for you. Right. And not only that, they were going to say, just suck it up. Right. Like awful, awful. But and I see this with other generations too, we minimize our experience because someone else has invalidated it for ourselves. So we have to validate our experience. So I like to say that, big T trauma are these experiences that were, they happened quickly. They were life-changing. Like let's say PTSD, a catastrophic illness, or a accident, or maybe, childhood abuse, or, like there are these bigger events that most people would look at that and go, yeah, that was trauma. Right. And even then they don't want you to talk about it, but anyway, they at least recognize it and let you define it that way. But then there's all these other experiences of maybe you were bullied in school. Maybe you lived in a system that was not built for you. Maybe, you had a parent who was sick, so you had to grow up really quickly. Maybe you moved around a lot. Maybe you had a friend group that stopped being your friend one year and you had a really hard time making friends again. All of these experiences change how you see yourself. They are cumulative in nature. And so we call those little T traumas, even though they're not little. I think they actually have bigger impact on people most of the time because we don't always look at them that way. And so they change how we see ourselves. They change how we then try and cope, like people pleaser, right? If I'm nice to people, maybe they'll be included. If I'm really useful and helpful, then maybe they'll see me as valuable and, I'll feel safer in the group. So we start to modify ourselves and how we operate to try and feel safe because of those experiences. And that changes how we see ourselves and what we believe is possible for us over time, and how we value ourselves. So very clearly, to start out, it is important for you to recognize if you have those big T traumas that you're getting support for that. If you have these little T traumas, to validate them for yourselves and get some help from someone to say, you know what? When I was 13 and all the friends I had from elementary school stopped being my friend in junior high school and I felt so alone. If you don't think that can show up in your business, you would be very wrong. That can absolutely show up in your business. It can show up how you show up in your business. So I always say that big T trauma explodes, little T trauma erodes, but they are both strong enough to move a mountain. So I really think that is the very first place to start.
Okay, so we start to dig into things and it might feel uncomfortable. We learn this in yoga. There's svadhyaya, it's self-study. And I love that you're saying let's also reach out and get help when we need to. I think that's the one thing I wish all people who have never tried therapy, try therapy and look for a therapist that feels like a great fit as well. That's super important. If it's not feeling right, it's
I
not.
agree. You're not meant to do this alone.
Yeah.
You're just not meant to.
I'm popping in here for a moment, Connected Yoga Teachers, because I want to give a shout out to OfferingTree because they are such an amazing small company committed to helping yoga teachers. Whenever I have a call with them, I'm reminded how this company is made up of people who care about the things that I care about. They love to help yoga teachers, especially yoga teachers who are building a business that is supporting people with their health and wellness. OfferingTree is also made up of people who care about social justice and the roots of yoga, and that means a lot to me. They promote the work that others are doing. They share articles, podcasts, workshops, and helpful tips all the time. If you are not already on their email list and following them on social media, I would say pause what you're doing and go do that right now. The workshops that they offer are free. You do not have to be using their software to access that. You just need to get on their email list. And if you're thinking, hey, I do need a software for a website, for booking, for payments, and all of the things related to running an online business, then make sure to use our coupon code. It's over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. This software simplifies everything that you need to do when it comes to teaching yoga, especially if you're teaching online or if your students are signing up online. I use this to send my Zoom links, to have people sign up and pay, and I love that it shows up with time zones. Students just pop on, fill out their waiver, fill out all the things, and it makes my life simpler as a business owner. Speaking of business, let's dive right back into our conversation with Nicole. I also want to just jump to procrastination because I hear this a lot, like, okay, I'm procrastinating, or I'm, waiting to the last minute to put this together, or how does that tie in with all of this?
Oh my gosh. So I've really been learning in the past year or two about my ADHD and neurodivergent brain. So there's so much more to this than I even thought. But I did write an article on Medium several years ago about procrastination. And it's layered. Like for some of us, we need that external pressure to then get the thing done. And that is just how you operate. But because the people around us, like these systems that want us to do things the way that they want us to do things, they want us to look the way they do, think the way they do, like that. We have been programmed to believe that the way that we do things is then deficient or pathological in some way. So I ask people to kind of look at, does this work for you? And you just feel bad about it because what someone else said about it? If that's true, then this just may be the way that you do things. And one of the things I say every day with clients is what works for you will work for you, right? Doesn't matter what they say, what works for you will work for you. So it could be that you are just someone who needs that external pressure to be interested enough in the task to get it done. It also could be that if you are someone who grew up with a very critical parent, I'm pointing at myself, critical parent, where there was no way to really gauge what was going to be good enough, okay. Procrastination can come in because we don't have a clear way forward. And so we're avoiding that feeling of being criticized, letting someone down. So we put the thing off because we've had this experience over and over again where it wasn't good enough. And it wasn't safe enough to even try, right? Because even your attempts to try will be scrutinized and be under the microscope. And that also feels unsafe. So that's more of a nervous system thing at that point, right? Your nervous system doesn't know how to do this without feeling like you're going to get in trouble. So
that's fascinating. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that. Because I feel like I interrupted to ask about procrastination. It was sitting in my brain there. So you had said we start to look at the trauma. What other things can we do?
Yeah. So, I also think that it's important to recognize that you are not your business, even if you are branded, even if you are the yoga teacher, or even if, I'm the person who does the work in my business, that it is something outside of you that you are relating to. And because of that, it is really easy to default into some of those toxic patterns of relationship that maybe we grew up with. It could be a parent, a coach, pastor, even if you had maybe a friend that was just kind of a bully who you just, stuck around with because you didn't know where you belonged. A teacher, like I had a learning difference in school my entire life. I never fit in that way. People did not really know how to teach me. So I really struggled and it impacted the way my self-esteem. That's a small T trauma. That business could then be this, mean teacher that's like, you can't learn, you can't do this thing. So if we recognize what is the relationship I have with my business now, if I were to think of it as someone outside of me, and does it feel supportive or does it feel punishing? Do I feel like that I am my own worst boss? A conversation I have a lot is if you were to be working for someone else and you had the environment in which you work, the hours that you have, would you still work for that person the way that you're treating yourself in your business? And if you had broken chair at a coffee table that you're working, trying to run your empire from. And if you had an employer that made you sit at that coffee table, would you be okay with that? So examining how you are treating yourself to determine like what relationship dynamic have I set up here? And then to start to figure out, well, what would I like for it to be? What relationship would feel supportive? And how can I get there? And so we talked earlier about the deeper why. I always tell people start there because that is the influence of childhood trauma on the origin of your business, and the relationship with your business comes next, so that you can make sure that you are not replicating old trauma patterns in your business, so that you feel supported. So that's the next place, as I would say, think about your business as an entity outside of yourself. Who is it? Where have you felt this way before?
Oh, these are good questions. I'm particularly thinking about our yoga teachers, because when you're saying your business is not you, it's a relationship. Let's look at that relationship. Yoga is a unique thing in that a lot of people will look at yoga as a lifestyle. Like there's this, not the westernized version of yoga where it's like bend into this pretzel, but like there are so many principles to live by. Like one is ahimsa, non-harm to yourself or to others. All of this philosophy. And I'm curious then, I think it's harder for yoga teachers to think this is a relationship. This is not me. This is a relationship with my business of teaching yoga. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess the question then would be if the goal is do no harm, does that include your business?
Right.
Because I see a lot of people who are in these, positions of doing no harm. They have, yoga teachers, healers, who personally live out, these values. But when it comes to their business, for some reason, all bets are off. And so then they do harm to themselves with their business. They do harm to their clients with their business. They do harm to their employees with their business, where they're micromanaging, and, it's almost, it seems like the business is outside of that sphere for some reason, so I don't know if that helps or not.
That does. I love to think about it's called the 8 limbs, like the philosophy of yoga. And there's a lot more philosophy of yoga, and we can bring it into our business. The other discomfort that I hear from yoga teachers is they don't want to mix business with this. And I'd be so curious to hear your thoughts on that. So yoga teachers will say, like, this is such a deep spiritual thing. I want to, I'm not comfortable with marketing or talking about money because it's this healing thing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's so many different discussions about that in particular. And I do think that comes down to getting more comfortable about valuing what you offer to the world. And that can only come from you. If it's a practice of sharing through volunteerism, or if it's something, I'm kind of like, if you're going to make a business out of it, it needs to be a business. Like, you need to commit. If you want it to be a volunteer thing, then understand that that's what that is, and stop putting the pressure on it to make, to make money for you, to be a supporter of your rent or whatever. But, it's also, we have been inundated with this information about who's allowed to charge, who's allowed to make money, what types of people are allowed to have wealth, in this country in particular. And I grew up to be a social worker. I took a vow of poverty when I decided to be a social worker and therapist, because I just wanted to help people. I felt so uncomfortable charging people for the time, because I was like, I have this gift, I have this training and this education. I see how beneficial it is. I just want everyone to have it. And no one around me questioned that, because in social work school, we were taught, you probably won't make but this, right? We were told and conditioned to minimize our expectations and to do things because we thought it was the right thing to do, without the right to be compensated for our gifts. And a lot of people benefit from us doing that. So It's layered.
I appreciate this so much, especially you sharing like this is the same in the social work world. Oh my gosh, there's so much that we could dig into. Running a business is not for the faint of heart at all.
No, it is not. And I've worked with people who are healers, people who run yoga studios, and they've really had to get clear about, what is my identity within this modality, this practice, this spiritual way of being that has really helped me, and how do I want to kind of compartmentalize this? Do I need to either really be okay and comfortable with charging for this because it is a business and it's a way I support myself, or it is something I feel deeply committed to and I'm going to volunteer my time to do this. But there's so many people straddling that fence with that discomfort. It's not helpful or useful to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so good. So tell our listeners how can they work with you if they're sitting here thinking, oh, I need more help with this?
I always tell people to start with the 3 whys. So I actually have a very inexpensive, I think it's like $12 e-course on the 3 whys book that I wrote many years ago.
Okay, so just to clarify, hold on, sorry. You wrote the 3 whys? Like I read the 3 whys a long time ago. I'm wondering if I have it on my bookshelf.
I don't know. No, it was an ebook. So Simon Sinek, I think, wrote a book called The 3 Whys or The 5 Whys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was like
different book altogether. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I would love that though. Simon, call me. So it's different. So I always tell people to start there because that's kind of like the origin, right? The motivation to start the business. If you've done that and you're more curious, I wrote a book, How to Love Your Business. It's over here. That's a really great place to learn more about that relationship piece with your business. So it's a book. You can buy it. It's very easy. If you are someone who is a healer, business owner, or someone who wants to understand how to be trauma conscious as an entrepreneur so that you do no harm to yourself, your business, the people that you're working with, I have a program called Do No Harm, where I teach people how to become trauma conscious entrepreneurs. So, but you can find that information on my website, nicole.lewis-keeber.com, and I can give you some links as well.
Perfect. We'll make sure to put the links in the show notes. I love how this do no harm is what your course is called. And that's in yoga. That's our ahimsa. It's a really important part. Is there anything else?
The body of my work. Yeah.
That's amazing. Is there anything else that you wish that entrepreneurs kind of understood a little bit better or knew as they're facing the daily struggles of running a business?
To get help, it's your therapist might not understand your business. Like I call myself a business therapist. I'm a unique animal. So, your therapist may not understand your business, but they can help you understand some of the behavior patterns that you're seeing that are annoying you in your business and help you figure out perhaps where that came from. So please get some support and help for yourself. This is a really hard thing that you're doing. And so you deserve to have that support. So get a therapist, get a coach, you don't have to do this alone. And it's really hard for us to read our own labels. So we need someone holding space for us that can say, hey, I've noticed this thing. Do you want to change that or are you good with that? So yeah, allow yourself to have support because you can heal yourself through your business. It is totally possible.
Yeah. And your friends are great at supporting you, but it's very different when it's a therapist outside of that friend circle and they're not afraid to say, this is really interesting what I'm seeing right now.
It's very true. Yeah. And it's why I have been inviting therapists to go through my program so that they can then help business owners in a different way. So
right. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Oh my goodness, Nicole, thank you so much for all of this amazing wisdom. I'm excited to hear from our connected yoga teachers and to hear like what really popped out at them, what feels like, oh, that's my to-do task out of this episode. And I would say, connected yoga teacher listeners, Choose one thing that really popped out at you. Only one thing. Don't take, a list of 50 things that you think you need to implement right now. What's the one thing that you could do after listening to today's episode? One thing that I did after talking with Nicole, because Nicole suggested that we all have an emotional sustainability plan in place. So one thing that I did after talking with Nicole was I booked a quarterly appointment with my therapist. And I'm so glad I did this. You know what happens? I think, do I really need that? Or if I didn't have it just as a recurring quarterly appointment, what would happen is I would just kind of forget about it until life got tougher to deal with. And I like telling people, I think it's important. It's an important message to put out there anyway. And I don't mind sharing it. I don't mind being vulnerable that I go to therapy. I don't mind telling people that at all. And I really compare it when I tell people and they look kind of surprised. I compare it to, going to the dentist, going to get my hair cut, also going to see a pelvic health PT. These are the things that I can do to maintain my health and wellness. And therapy is one of those big things that can help me to stay healthy and well and to stay on track with things in my life and to look at my own stuff. I would love to hear from you on this. If you had a key takeaway or if you have something to add to this conversation, leave me a voicemail. Tell me your thoughts in our Facebook group. The connectedyogateacher.com will lead you both to the Facebook group and to our voicemail. Or get on my email list. I send an email out at least once a week talking about the podcast. I would love to hear from you. One other side note here, if you are going to therapy and you see the benefits that it has in your life and you found, that therapist that really helps you and keeps you moving forward in a positive way, let's talk about it if you feel safe to do so. Let's normalize it. Let's, post it somewhere on social media so that the next time someone goes to book a therapy appointment, they might ask you for a recommendation, like, who's your therapist? Who do you really like to see? Oh, so-and-so does this. It can't be that bad. I think that sometimes there is this negative stigma that still goes along with our mental health and getting help and therapy. And we can help to break that down just by telling people if we feel safe to do so. And if you're sitting here at the end of the episode and you're like, I don't have any key takeaways or to-do list tasks, here's one that is unrelated to today's topic, but is related to supporting the podcast so that we can keep doing this. If you could leave us a review over in iTunes, it means the world to us over here. It helps other yoga teachers find us. You can go to any show notes page. So today's show notes are over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/301. All of the links are there. And at the very top, you'll see a button that will help you to leave a review. If you would like to hang out in real time, not in person yet. In the snowy season here, I typically stay pretty close to home, but in December, coming right up, December the 12th, we have a live call inside of Pelvic Health Professionals. It's all about yoga for menopause. It's with Niev Daly, who was on the podcast back in episode 299. I would say attend this call if you are working with any students who are perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal in that phase of life. So basically, if you're teaching yoga to the average class, if you're teaching to people who are in this phase of life, Niev is a yoga teacher who specializes in this, and I'm so excited that we get to dive in and really learn how we can support this group of students. So if you want to sign up for that call and get access to everything else in our growing library, where we talk to worldwide pelvic health experts about the most up-to-date information, head on over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Next week on the podcast, I'm going to tell you because you're here all the way to the end and I like you to know, hey, what's coming up next? Sue Anderson is actually going to come and talk with us. Sue is a yoga teacher who specializes in helping people who are dealing with grief and loss. I'm looking forward to sharing this episode because some of us are coming into the holiday season. And grief can really show up in these times. And also, all of us have been living in pandemic times where we lost the quote unquote normal way of life. And there's been a lot of research and a lot of talk about the grief and loss of living through pandemic times. So I feel like this is a good way to close out the year, to look at grief and loss together and to look at the benefits that yoga can have for someone who is experiencing grief and loss. So I will see you back here next week at the same time. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts so that it drops Monday morning and it's all ready for you. And I also want to give a shout out of thank you to our team who makes this podcast happen. Suzanne works away on the audio, Crunch does all kinds of writing for us, and Sinead supports our community by answering all kinds of questions and keeping us on track and organized. Thank you so much to our entire team, and thank you to you, dear listener. You're here all the way until the end of today's episode, and that means a lot. It means a lot that you've shown up for yourself, had a listen, looked at maybe how you can help yourself within your business, and also that you are supporting the podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, until we meet again, I'm curious to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?